can you be meek and quiet and be a driven extrovert at the same time? Because the fact is, God does make women as extroverts. Some women are extroverts and some women are introverts. Some women are driven, natural born leaders, and some women are more passive followers. So what do you do if you're born as a driven extrovert? First thing I want to do is look at 1 Peter 3 verses 4 through 6, which I love this section of passage of scripture. It changed my life because my heart is so to please the Lord. And when it says that the meek and quiet spirit is an ornament that in the sight of God is of great price, because I, as an Enneagram 2, so long to be wanted and valued as something special. Like, I'm not just the average run-of-the-mill person. God really cares about me individually. That anything that points out that's of great value, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to be of great value. And so I studied out what this meek and quiet spirit is, and I want to point out the fact that it says spirit, not personality. Now, when you look at what meek and quiet are defined as, they do give quite a bit of insight. So meek in the Webster's 1828 dictionary, I use that because it's the closest to the time frame of 1611 where the King James was written. So it probably has the closest understanding to the actual intent of those words. Meek is described as mild of temper, soft, gentle, not easily provoked or irritated. Now picture this as a spirit that inside you have a gentle spirit. You're not quick to fly off the handle inside. You're not easily irritated. It says yielding and submissive. That's not even just full of subjection and obedience. That's like soft and malleable, like Play-Doh. You are easy to conform to your authority's desires. Given to forbearance and under injuries. Like somebody can do something that actually hurts you and you're okay to roll with it. You don't have to stand up for yourself. You don't have to prove who you are and what you deserve and your value, because you're content inside of yourself as to who you are as it relates with God. You don't have anything to prove because you don't have to prove it to anybody but to God. And in this it says Moses was very meek above all men. So I think it's interesting that the first person who was spoken about meekness was a man. And he was under the authority of God, and he did deal with a lot of flack and frustration, and he had the right to order and judge and give punishment to different people. And yet his heart was so merciful that he was willing. He says, God, I'd rather that you put this on me and my name than to lay it to their account. He was willing to forbear at his own injury, his own expense, for the greater good of somebody else. And submissive to divine will, that's another thing that this was defined as. And the verse we see is, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. That we're willing to, when our spirit is gentle and calm and have control and yielding and moldable to God's divine will, God blesses us for it. Quiet is the definition of that is peaceable, not turbulent, not giving offense. I think of still waters, that when you are content with who you are as it relates to God, and he is filling your needs, and he is giving you your purpose, that when something huge drops on you, you don't suddenly splash everybody and everything around you because it has inconvenienced you. You are able to be still and then take time to reflect with the Lord as to what this is. So again, it's not necessarily happy and personality and stories, because what if you're telling a fun story and then somebody says something really snarky to you? I'm going to move this because that's going to drive me crazy. Somebody says something snarky to you, are you going to lash out at them or suddenly become sullen and broody? Or are you just like, whatever, love covers a multitude of sins. I didn't do anything wrong according to God. I'm just going to ignore them. Maybe they're just having a bad day. And you don't let it impact your spirit. Yeah, of course, it's easy to take offense at that moment. And you might be like, okay, moving on. But being excited and being friendly and hi, how are you doing? I'm Melissa. Who are you? So nice to see you here. That is an extrovert. That is engaging. You can use that for ministry. But on the inside, things don't affect you so much. That doesn't necessarily... So do you understand the difference between the spirit and a personality? So quiet, not exciting controversy. That is interesting. And so I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when it comes to, there's a video on the clamorous woman. But not exciting controversy, disorder, or trouble. Well, you just did that to me, and now I'm going to. And you just switch your disposition because how dare they? They need to know that you're upset, and they need to change what they're doing, or else they're going to pay. It's like emotional extortion. Extortion is like a blackmail type of thing, or like a child throwing a temper tantrum. I'm just going to cry until I get my own way. I'm just going to be moody until I get my own way. I'm going to be snappy and harsh and irritable and not gentle and not quiet and not content with the fact that God's in control and that God put that person over you who's going to make mistakes, or that your children can be annoying. Isn't that just the way that life is? I can accept that other people are like that because I accept that I also have faults. And I'm not accountable to them. I am accountable to God to how I treat people. And so I'm not going to try to manipulate my circumstances, because inside I'm railing and vengeful and bitter and angry and obstinate because I didn't get my way. And you're doing things the way that I wouldn't do them, or you said something in a snippy way that bothers me. And it's a spirit within you. And I really believe that in 1 Peter 3, we're going to go back there, and it says the hidden man of the heart. Because even a quiet person, an introvert, can have the nastiest tongue behind closed doors. Can have the nastiest spirit and the silent treatment and that manipulative, controlling spirit that everybody out there thinks they're so sweet and they're so mild and they're just so prim and proper. But the people behind closed doors know that they're actually really, they just hide it really well because they're good at being quiet around everybody else. So you can be quiet, but not have a meek and quiet spirit. So even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is an exterior manifestation of the calmness within. And the calmness within is of God, to God of great price, and who he describes it of. And this is what changed me. Because I would say that even though my heart was to do right, I really struggled a lot with fear. Fear of my security, fear of what people thought about me, fear of financial security, of things that other people would do, fear of people who were in my circle doing something that might cast a shadow upon my name. As a good name is rather to be chosen than great riches. And so I would try to control those things, to control how I felt. And when I recognized that God says, look at Sarah and the holy women of old who trusted in God. And I have an entire video on that on YouTube about the first thing you need to know to be a good wife. And that talks about that story of learning to trust in God and learning to surrender control. And I think that when you learn to truly trust in God and you learn to surrender control, that you do start gaining the meek and quiet spirit, because it doesn't rely on you. And those external things, they are somewhat irrelevant because you're only accountable to your responsibilities and how they please the Lord, and how your subjection to your authority, and even if they're a bad authority, I say over and over that if you read who Abraham was, even though he was in that time a good man and God chose him to bring Christ through his bloodline, he took Sarah to Egypt twice and lied and put her in a shocking situation to where she was taken to be married to other men, but God intervened on her behalf, and they never knew her in the biblical sense because God made it impossible for them. So even though her husband did what was wrong, she still obeyed him, and God took care of her. And I think that is the key lesson, that we follow faulty, sinful authorities, whether it's your government, whether it's your pastor, whether it's your father, whether it's your husband. We as women are under somebody's authority, and men are under somebody's authority. What are we going to do with that when we think the people above us are doing wrong and will do it wrong to our injury? It will impact us. We will bear the consequences of their bad choices. And if inside of you, you think, no way am I going to let that happen, that is when you lose the quiet spirit. That is when you start to become clamorous rather than wise and prudent and discreet, which is what I'll talk about in the next video. So I want to ask yourself, even if you are an extrovert or an introvert, I want to ask you, who is leading you? Because there's a difference between being obedient and subjection versus leading. Because sometimes our husbands or whoever, they will follow our leading just because we are driven, passionate people who are visionaries. Are you leading? Are you the one who's coming up with all of the ideas? Are you the one who's taking charge in a path? I can think of so many different things where this applies, but I'm not going to say them. But we as women can just take charge. And we're not necessarily disobeying our husbands because they think it's a great idea too. Gosh, I'm lucky to be married to this woman who has so many good ideas. But is God leading them? Or are you leading them? Then, and the reason I say that is because that comes back to the issue of control and patience and quietness and submitting ourselves that God can lead us through our authority. Next question is, when your authority leads in a way that you can see is a bad direction, are you willing to go to Egypt? Or are you going to throw a fit? However your fit is, whether it's a quiet fit, whether it's a snarky fit, whether it's a passive-aggressive fit, whether it's a bulldozer fit, how do you deal with it? Do you go to prayer? Do you trust the Lord like the holy women of old? Are you fearful and fretful? Do you lose sleep and worry because they're going to make this bad decision? Or are you able to discreetly communicate it after you've prayed a whole bunch and then leave it and walk away saying, I've been a helpmeet and I'm totally trusting that if they make a bad decision, be not dismayed, whatever the time, God will take care of you. What is your area of responsibility and delegation? Are you taking care of that, or are you meddling in the areas of delegation that God gave to somebody else? Because sometimes we can get so fretful and excited and constantly thinking about this other thing that we're not in control of, that we aren't doing our real jobs. And then are you doing your job well? Or are you just doing it halfway? Because isn't it interesting the inconsistencies that people can have, and they can point out the flaws of the leadership, but are they willing to change when the leadership points out their flaws? Well, maybe you could learn to cook better. Maybe you can learn to clean your house better. Maybe you can learn how to get your children to obey better and have a better attitude. Maybe you can do your job at your workplace better. a little less slothful, a little less grumbly, a little less gossipy, a little more initiative? If they complained about how you did it, how'd you take that? Would you change? And what are your areas of ministry? Because God has called us to ministry. I love Romans chapter 12, where it talks about those who are given to hospitality, be hospitable. Those who are giving, give with simplicity. Those who are given to teaching, teach. Those who are exhorters, exhort. Focus on the ministry that God has for you and stop focusing on what other people should be doing that would make you feel more comfortable. And when you stop focusing on others, whether that's what other people think about you or what other people should be doing or what other people would do to make your life easier, or don't they see that there's so many bad things that are going to happen if they as a leader go that direction, and it's going to impact you, and it's going to impact your family, it's going to impact your children, it's going to impact the future. And instead of doing that, are you praying and then saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to leave that with you. Help me today to do what I'm supposed to do with a good spirit. Help me to do better today than I did yesterday. Help me to keep my eyes on you and please you and love you and be calm in the fact that you're in control and power belongeth to God. So that's probably the best way I can describe. Can you have a meek and quiet spirit and be a driven extrovert? Absolutely. And you can have a raging, clamorous, nasty temperament and spirit and be an introvert. So those are my thoughts. Next video I'm working on is clamorous women versus discreet women, and what does that look like in today's society.